is going on, people? My name is Verno. You are listening to the Cerebros, and I am here today to talk about debatably the best issue of the Hickman era of X-Men, and I have undebatably the two best people that are out there talking X-Men on the interwebs. I have Ernie from Blurred Without Fear on YouTube, and I have Dave from Kraken Krakoa / Comic Book Herald, and I am stoked to do this. This is like the best issue yet that I've had a chance to talk to some guests about. So what's going on, Ernie and Dave?
Oh man, everything.
Yeah, thanks for having us. This is a fun one. I'm glad you reached out because definitely I recorded a bunch about it. Ernie, I'm sure you had a lot to say too, and I feel like there's more to be said. Even when I was done with mine, I did a 20-minute stream of consciousness uninterrupted conversation about this comic, and I'm like, I did not touch everything. So I'm excited to talk with you guys.
No, I didn't either.
The last couple times that I've had guests on, I purposely, Ernie, I told you, like, I didn't watch your videos before just to, have a fresh idea. But there was so much to unfold in this issue that I watched both of your videos twice, as a matter of fact, just to soak it all in and get your guys' thoughts and help organize this conversation, really. I just want to begin by getting your overall thoughts and just your opinions on this issue. Ernie, we'll start with you.
Well, overall opinion, I loved it. I thought it was definitely probably the most cohesive, like just straight through narrative that they've done up to this point on any of the, I guess, Hickman era stuff. Especially like the X-Men side of things, always like a bunch of one shots, but this one has two, technically, I guess 3 or 4 different parts spread out. But I thought it was great. It was fun. I had a great time with it. It told a story that I wasn't expecting to get and gave a lot of characters some really good moments to shine, albeit I think the one, I think I said this in my video, my one blemish on it is I didn't appreciate the retread of the Forgotten Lover story arc that we literally had just revisited in Sword number 4 with Frenzy and Cyclops.
Right, we had just had that conversation, you and I, about Frenzy and Cyclops. I understood that, but I have a different perspective on it. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Dave, what did you think about the issue?
I mean, I think I'd agree. I think the general consensus around it being one of the best issues of the Hickman era of X-Men, I think is something I buy into. I think I'm a little resistant to the idea that this X-Men number 19 is in fact the best comic of the Hickman X-Men era, especially if we include House and Powers. If we're including House and Powers, then to me it's like no dice. It's not that close. Sure. But if we're talking specifically his X-Men run as a separate entity, which I think most people are, then it's an interesting conversation. I still kind of prefer X-Men number 4 because that was the moment of Hickman writing Professor X, Magneto, Apocalypse all together. It's him doing a very Jonathan Hickman concept of them going and speaking with world leaders at a summit in Davos. That to me tapped into the potential of House and Powers in a way that I think very little actually in the X-Men verse sense has. X-Men 6 and 7, I think, are other candidates here as well. Verno, I saw, in your Twitter poll, you did leave out Horde Culture. I'm assuming just a massive oversight on your part, forgetting the greatness of Horde Culture. I jest. No, I shouldn't say that's no one's favorite comic because surely there are some octogenarians that is their favorite comic. But nonetheless, I think 19, the coolest thing about 19 to me was it was the first comic in this Hickman era of everyone likes to talk about he's a long-term planner. You got to be patient. You got to play the long game. X-Men number 19 was the first time where you said, oh, this is why. This is the payoff, right? We're paying off something that was set up in X-Men 1, that was set up in further issues since then, in 5 especially. In 19 was where we got that burst and that everyone who's been saying, be patient, they can go, look, see, this is why. And they're right, because it's super paid off.
Exactly. And I've been having a lot of conversations about, and I think I've talked to both of you about this, like, is it too long? Is he requiring too much patience of us? And I think both of you had kind of said, and Rock and Rob, when I talked to him, just be patient. It's about to pop off. And you're right. Like, this is, I think Hickman knows. He knows how long he can string people along. I think the comic shut down because of the pandemic added a couple months even further. Like, we would have got this a couple months back, and that would have it wouldn't have felt so long as it did. It would have been long, but it wouldn't have felt quite as long as it have. But overall, I love it. I like your point about X-Men 4. I will throw in there X-Men number 12 because that's the one I kind of feel like a lot of people leave it out of the conversation as the best one. But for me, this is the one it reminds me the most of. X-Men 12 being the one where we got the Summoners version of the story of Amenth and Arakko. And that was a lot of world building like this and just covering a huge, like you could make a movie based on X-Men number 12. You could make a movie based on X-Men number 19 as well. Like there could be a full-length feature film. It could be a season on Disney Plus just of this story, which I think that's the best way to tell it. Give me a full season on this comic book, which is insane to say, but I truly believe that. But and okay, let's jump into the beginning of this comic. They tell us very succinctly, like just in a couple pages, they set up the group's codependency that they have on each other and the family bonding. Just in just a couple panels that we get, we see it all. You could even take the words out and you would understand it. They need Wolverine to survive this all the years, and then just the look on their face where they've bonded because of their synergy that they're using, and then the line that I think we all must have loved when we got to it, where he says, "The first 50 years were the longest." It's like, oh my God, like what is going to happen in this comic? What was your reaction just to the opening and then that line right there?
So, Ernie, if you want to go ahead first, I'll jump in after you. That sounds good.
Thank you, Dave, for being a better host than I am.
No, it's tricky on Zoom.
I was like, ooh, man. No, for me, the opening, seeing all that, the aftermath of the destruction from the post-human fight, seeing Synch, Darwin, Wolverine, X-23, whatever you want to call her. She's both to me. Doesn't matter.
Right. Well, this has made me call her Wolverine more than anything because it's really I didn't read Tom Taylor's run, so now for me, I feel like she's Wolverine. But
I actually just like the idea of being able to say that Synch is doing the no with Wolverine, and it makes it so much fun and opens up so many awesome conversations. No, I was here for it because it showed a solidarity growing between characters who, I mean, for the most part, don't really ever interact with one another in any meaningful ways on panel as much as they probably should have by this point. And we're seeing these characters that I think some would argue are probably some of the most, maybe with the exception of Wolverine, Laura Kinney. I think maybe with the exception, she gets a lot more time than either one of the other two characters, but I think even she's kind of been short-shifted in some ways. Long-term, booking-wise, I feel like, she hasn't gotten quite as much as she probably should have by this point for a character that's been around as long as she has. But I like the fact that, they started off just kind of being like, yeah, it's just a mission. We know each other, but we don't know each other. And then, you see them, that look they give each other at the very beginning when, after the explosion, how, it feels like just the way they're describing everything just sounds like they became, I guess, the way we look at, characters like Cyclops, Jean and Wolverine and Nightcrawler and Gambit, dude, these guys have been they've been in the thick of it for decades, man. These guys are tight. I feel like we got that out of them, but just in a short form sort of way that it's not really 100% fleshed out, but Hickman gives us enough to let us know that these guys became family. Right. They became the type of tight unit that we would expect to see out of the core original recipe X-Men.
Yeah.
So I was here for it. 1,000%.
Yeah, that part was super cool. I think if you had told me, before going into the run, hey, one of the biggest moments, one of the best stories in here is going to be a Synch story. I would have been who? Literally, I would have been like, who is that? And I'm a fairly big X-Men fan. But the fact that it is super cool. I love that. I love that potential of the Krakoa era where all these mutants who haven't had a glow up before, who haven't had that opportunity to be the star of the show, really can be. And I think, with Synch, it's really cool. This is from his perspective, it's his story. I think he gets a good arc. I think because we know a bit about Laura Kinney, because we know her as Wolverine. I did read that Tom Taylor run, and I quite love it. It's definitely endeared me to her significantly. I would say I think Darwin does get short shrifted. Definitely, stories aren't. stories that Darwin is in, they tend to like make cool use of his power set, but never give us what he's thinking. Like if you look at X-Men Deadly Genesis, he's just like they need to stop blowing up Darwin without any of his thought process. Like I could use some actual personality in what's going on there, but that's a criticism of a thing I really loved. The fact that the focus was given to Sync. I'm not saying that should have been different. It's more just like Darwin needs a story at some point. But Verno, to your point, I think the coolest thing that issue 19 does to me is in X-Men 18, my criticism was, okay, these characters all went into the vault. We know time is super wonky there. We know it's really weird, and we know they're investigating what Professor X called the greatest threat to mutant kind. That's fascinating, but in 18, it played out very straightforward. It was very, very Marvel Comics superhero, one big battle kind of thing, and it didn't really deliver any conclusion. Now, everyone at the end of that, there were two camps. That was disappointing. I've been waiting forever, and that was it. And then there was the camp of, yeah, it's a two-part story. Just wait for the second part. And it was tough to get in the mindset of the second part. But what issue 19 does is it makes good on all of that patience, on all of that hype, and it also then does the thing that I was looking for in 18, which was to say, oh, you want to play with time? You want to play with a really weird time landscape? This is what this comic can do. We're going to traverse hundreds, if not thousands of years in like 4 data pages. Like it was the like coolest, most fulfilling way for a comic book storyteller to be like, hey, this, to your point, this could be a season on Disney Plus. This could be a mini series in and of itself. We're going to do it in one issue. That is so much easier said than done. And it does it here really successfully. And that's why I loved it.
I think one of Hickman's strengths, I think this is, for my money, this is like where he is showing that strength the best, is his I think the term is like the economy of words. He can tell you a lot in a couple sentences, and he does that a handful of times throughout this issue. And then he makes better use of these data pages than anybody. Clearly, they're like his thing, and he crushes it through this. It's weird, like structurally, with the way this comic book is played out. He's more or less like spoiling stuff, and then he shows you that stuff. He, the whole show don't tell. Well, he tells us everything that happens first, and then he shows us. And a lot of times he'll take that, like, while the art is showing us what he's already told us, he is going over it with like different ideas. Sometimes he's talking about things while he's showing you the things that he just showed you. It's confusing, but he'll be talking about completely different things, like the whole Sync's father and the lesson that he was getting from him and all that. The art has nothing to do with that. He's just retreading the data pages. But the first data page, they clear up a lot of things that we already know. They confirm a ton of things that we know. We've already went over it. The time is wonky thing. They're trapped in there. They can't get out. They can't contact the outside world. And then one thing we never see on Paddle, but there's a child of the vault that Horador, I think is how you'd say it, who's a teleporter. Horador, there you go. And so we know that they have.
I had to look it up. I had to look. That's the only reason I know.
They've preserved Horador's DNA, so that Sync has the ability. I would assume he's like just walking around with a vial of his DNA or something, so he just constantly can sync up with that and then teleport. It's one of the coolest things about superhero comics is when people use their powers, when writers use the characters' powers in interesting ways that fit the plot of the story. And this is like, it's a masterclass in that. The way that Hickman uses Sync and Darwin's powers, along with X-23 throughout this, is amazing. I want to say, I want to move in. Dave, you had a real good point. I think Ernie might have brought it up too. The parallels between the Arbor manga, or the Hatchery, which I always call, but it is Arbor manga, right? That's the same thing.
Arbor Magna.
Okay, thank you. And then the child grow room, whatever the hell they're calling that.
Creche.
Where they're more or less.
I looked these up because people make fun of me for mispronouncing things.
I don't have comments on the YouTube thing as much, so I don't get as much.
It is the most common criticism is you pronounce things like a big weirdo. That comes up all the time.
Yeah.
More or less, I just love the parallels between the two. And one thing I want to ask you guys: we know, as we're saying, it's 2 months of growth, 2 months of sleeping, and our mutants are. Their fear is going away, and they're traveling into this area while the children are sleeping. And the first time they go there, they luck out and they don't run into this Madre character. The second time they do, and it appears that she puts a hurting on them. all these parallels between what's going on with the mutants on Krakoa and the Children of the Vault. Do you guys think that Madre is kind of like representing Moira X? Like Moira X was Mother in the eighth life of Moira McTaggart.
Mother Akaba, right? Yeah.
You guys kind of thinking that's the parallel going on there?
I didn't make a Moira connection myself. I don't think you're too far off base to necessarily think that. I think one of the most interesting pieces of the Vault as this primary threat to me is the fact that they are so incredibly similar to the mutants of the Krakoa era. Like they're like down to resurrection, down to like the possible advancement of like chimeras and combining mutant DNA to be basically to be your best self, right? To be this version of mutant kind that is like unimpeachably strong and is going to survive. Because that's the thing that again, like when we think long term, when we think powers of 10, big picture, they're not just trying to like survive on Earth. They're not just trying to even like conquer Earth. They're literally trying to survive forever. Okay, they're trying to ensure mutant survival forever, whatever that means. And the Vault is kind of that idea, but a little more singular in their focus in terms of like they actually do just want to conquer Earth. Like that would be sufficient to them at least initially. But they're so similar just in terms of like their involvement, their like abilities that they're manifesting in themselves. But the main difference is obviously the Vault does it technically. It's like all on a technicality that they're different, and it's very interesting to me too that like I theorized going into this that like okay, what like these mutants are gonna be in here for a while. What if they struck up like an alliance with the Vault? What if they found some of these commonalities? And because that's been kind of an inversion we've seen with things like the Brood. With some other examples like Araco, right, through Ten of Swords, where it's like these things that initially are threats. Part of the idea of this era of X-Men is we break all the rules. So the idea of good guy, bad guy, that gets separated and everyone just kind of becomes an ally. I actually don't think that's kind of possible with the Vault, at least the way this has been structured currently. Yeah. I thought it might be, but now it's kind of like the Vault is so singularly focused on like, no, it's got to be us. It's got to be us. It can't be mutants. And they just seem to have no wiggle room on that in a way that is kind of fascinating. I think the parallel stops there. I think like, you could, for Madre, you could say Professor X, you could say Moira. Either way you slice it though, in terms of the parallels, I think the coolest part of it is like Hickman fleshing out what the Vault is, fleshing out the city, which of course has connections to his Ultimates run. If you've read that in the Maker, and there's some cool, like just like, that kind of like Marvel continuity stuff where he's pulling from his own work in the past. That to me is when, if they wanted to go back to this time, if like, in issue 34, it was all of a sudden like return to the Vault, what really happened with Darwin, I'm super excited again because I want to see even more of these characters, and there's still so much like potential there. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
I think like what you're saying, like I almost don't even want Hickman to touch it. I think it'd be kind of fun to just leave this. He goes on about his business, and in 10 years, somebody writes an amazing story about this 12-part miniseries of what happened in the Vault. They flesh out. One of the most interesting aspects of this in the data page is when the team fractures. Like, to me, that's super interesting. It says Wolverine hunts alone, and Sync is the one in that time period that's most vulnerable. Like, what the fuck happened that made them make that decision that they're like, sorry, Sync, I can't even be around you, and they just, they split up, and he didn't have their abilities to help him stay alive. Ernie, what do you think about that in general, of just that era, and where would you want to see them revisit this? You want to see Hickman write it?
Honestly, for me, that I think is kind of one of the areas where you have characters with the power sets that are like Syncs. You leave him in a very vulnerable position because his powers are based on who is around him, who he can pull from. It also means that it makes it a more dangerous mission, just in terms of the fact that he almost kind of has to throw himself into danger to have power. So, like, it makes it very interesting. Like, I wouldn't mind if you, as Hickman is wont to do, maybe give it about 10 to 12 more issues, then maybe come back and kind of like what they did with one of my personal favorite X-Men issues he's done so far, I believe it was number 6. what they did with Mystique when they went back and revisited that, like the moment in House of X where everybody was like, "Oh my God, Hickman, he doesn't even know what he's doing, man. He messed up, man. He's got Mystique running around here acting like she doesn't know what's going on, and it doesn't make any sense. This is a plot hole." And like Hickman comes back, X number 6, he's like, "No. This is why she was doing what she like." I think most of us, I think all of us who regularly are reading stuff like this, I think we kind of saw the writing on the wall even before all that. But going back to that, that's kind of what I would like. I would like to give him the X-Men 6 treatment. Go back and say, okay, well, here's what was going on when Sync was out here, solo dolo. Then do another issue where here's what was going on with Wolverine while she was out here, solo dolo. And then same thing for Darwin. You kind of go back. I like kind of go back and revisit ever so often. I would like to go back. I don't know if I would want another writer to do it, but it's not to say another writer couldn't come in and squeeze some extra juice out of the story that maybe Hickman wouldn't have thought to do.
I think Hickman's strength is like an episode like this. I think there's a lot of writers that could get more into the character. Like, just off the top of my head, it's not like I've read a ton of them, but I love them to death. Like, if Ed Brubaker were to write this story about the children, or about this era inside of the vault, someone like that I could see just actually doing a better job than Hickman. Hickman laid out the idea. Someone could go in and flesh these the roles that the characters are playing during this story. They could flesh that out even more, I believe.
I think one of the challenges with Hickman's run too is, at least the way it's been structured so far, and maybe this will change, is that he's writing X-Men. Okay, he's writing one title, and if he takes the time, for example, to do 2 or 3 Vault flashback issues, then all of the other seeds and all of the other threads and characters, now we're waiting months and months and months to get to those. So I think by the nature of him spreading the wealth, if you will, and covering so much ground, it actually does make it, because I kind of had this with the issues you guys had mentioned in the build to Ten of Swords, where we did the flashback on the true history of Arakko and Apocalypse and all that. And the first time, I was like, this is amazing. I love it. We're setting up Apocalypse. We're setting up this secret backstory. We're setting up this whole realm and world. All that stuff was incredible. And I think there was huge payoffs in like the core issues of Ten of Swords, like the destruction and whatever it was, the Genesis and that sort of thing. But when he then came back to that 2 times in a row, I was like, this is too much. We're revisiting this too many times now. It's an interesting thing.
Also with same pages too, same like exact pages.
Right, exactly. And there's a danger, I think, in revisiting and over-explaining. I had this problem with WandaVision as well, and maybe it's a me thing. But episode 4, I think it was, of that series, was like maybe it's 3, but it was the Randall Park character and Kat Dennings.
I think it was 4.
Yeah, it was them revisiting
4.
and explaining basically everything that had happened to date. And to me, it was too handholdy. It was too much like, let us explain all of the mystery and all of the intrigue. And sometimes that stuff's better left mysterious, right? And I think
it was a spoon.
Exactly. And I think with the Vault, you might, especially in the Hickman verse, you might run into that a little bit, where it's like that, because kind of like you said, that sentence of like, there's a schism, and all those questions of why was there a schism, what happened? It's almost like that Ernest Hemingway thing of like, write the saddest story ever in 4 words, right? It's like leave to the imagination the emotion and the detail. There's value in that. So as interested as I am in that time, and as open as I would be to, like I said, a return to the Vault single one-off, I don't think you want to overexploit, although I am curious what you guys think in terms of like what's coming next from the Vault, because we're not done with them. They got what they wanted, and then some,
no.
So they're going to come back in a big way, and I'm curious what that's going to look like.
Oh, I am too. Big time. Arnie, did you have something there? Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
Oh, no. No, all I was going to say is that in terms of with the posthumans and everything that we've witnessed, we've watched them evolve like multiple times, seeing like what their layout is, what the plan originally was, and that how they finally were able to get what they wanted in the end. After all the hundreds and maybe thousands of years of just messing around and all this other stuff, they finally got what they wanted. And I don't know, it makes me kind of laugh, because I feel like Hickman, like kind of like what Dave was saying about you have to tell a story in a very succinct way and make it effective. Hickman does this really good job of creating moments that will have people talking.
Right.
Yeah, that'll get people talking for years to come. The way that people talk about how the Claremont years really kind of brought focus and really hammered on this idea that we have today about how equality and things of that nature. Why can't two people see? Why can't two different groups of people get along? I think this one's going to kind of set the reason why. Or not so much the reason why, but why, maybe give more of a little bit answer to why there are certain people who just cannot be changed. The reason why the posthumans won't change their course, despite the fact that they're literally trying to do the exact same thing that the X-Men are.
Yeah.
They're literally becoming the thing that they hate.
One thing that kind of interests me, and obviously we don't know, it's all speculation, is what would a Children of the Vault Ran world look like? They accomplish their goal. They come out of their vault, their 4th gen Children of the Vault. They take over. They kill everybody is what I assume that they're going to do. Then what are they going to do? Are they going to set up amusement parks, start building bars, start a band? You know what I mean? Are they going to...
What does downtime look like for the Children of the Vault? You're right. We have not gotten to see them just play.
No.
Have fun. Verno, that makes me think too, how into an alternate reality I would be where the Children of the Vault win. So Age of Apocalypse style. If we do that post Vault win, or even Days of Future Past, I guess would be the better. Well, not necessarily better. I do love me some Age of Apocalypse, but anyway, a 2-3 issue thing of the Vault won. Here's what happened, or Posthumans won. That would be a cool as hell story arc that I would be very game for.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys about I basically only have one nitpick when it comes to this comic book. There was only one thing I'm that's a little forced in there, and I didn't quite understand it. Maybe you guys can clear it up for me. But their plan after the second time that they entered not the city center, but the child creche, as I believe you called it, when Madre whoops their ass, and their plan is to cut Sync's arm off, to cut Darwin's
arm off, yeah.
And to leave it behind. I don't know that really lays out, it makes sense. It allows for what Hickman wanted to happen, where the Children of the Vault end up using his DNA to accomplish their goal of a 4th gen children. But did that really make sense to you? Okay, we'll just chop his arm off, and they're going to assume that we're all dead. Maybe if they chopped each of their arms off or something, but it was it kind of seemed like it was a way to make what he wanted to happen, but it didn't make sense.
Yeah, the funny part with that is, given everyone's character set and powers, you could actually do that with any of them. And they would all have the ability to regenerate. I guess in Laura's case, you probably couldn't get through the bone because it's made of adamantium, so don't bother. My understanding of it was just we are trying to convince them that we died in this blast. Not their best thought out plan, I think, ultimately.
Right.
And I think that's one thing we're seeing a lot though across X-Men, because it's not just them. Is everyone in mutant kind right now is they're really fast and loose with mutant DNA. Right? Wolverine goes to an auction and they've got one of his old hands. Xeno's got everyone's data at this point. They got Domino, they got Queen Choir.
Hell, he throws blood on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, and one thing that got me thinking, this issue in particular, was mutant DNA was probably occupied and out there well before Krakoa. Because I've been sort of critical of them in you launch Krakoa and it's based on mutant DNA getting access, and all of you are so sloppy with it. But then if you actually stop and you dig into the Marvel ramifications, it's but the CIA probably has DNA. There are these organizations. You got the Weapon X program, right? There are these organizations that would have this anyway. So the idea that Krakoa is secure because only mutants can use the gates, that can be messed with pretty easily, right? There's a lot of ways around that.
There's a lot of mutants that just aren't on the island. They could go grab, before Beak came to the island, they go grab Beak or any one of his dozen kids and walk through the gate. Kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's almost.
I mean, they had Maverick.
They had Maverick.
They literally
exactly
had Maverick.
Yeah.
Exactly right. So the fact that the Vault got a mutant, I was less critical of them being oh, you gave up Darwin, you sent, because there is a thing too of if the mutants had if Krakoa had done nothing. you know, if they hadn't sent anyone into the vault. And it kind of got me thinking, I haven't like written it out yet, but I'm like, if you played out the Dawn of X and the Reign of X right now, and you just took every storyline and you just said, what would have happened if Krakoa did nothing? How much better would things actually be? There's an argument, because if you don't send anyone into the vault doesn't get Darwin's DNA the way that they did, right? They actually, I think bigger, more importantly, they don't realize they need it, is the thing. And then they don't get their 4th generation vault, which is now like verging on Nimrod hybrid with a mutant adaptive capabilities or something, you know?
Right.
And it kind of just keeps raising this question of like, is Krakoa better off not being proactive and trying not to do
No, you make a good point. It's like literally, I feel like every other issue of any X-Men related anything, it's always, I feel like the most common thread is mutants found a way to make their problems worse. Like they say, well, we don't kill people anymore. Well, but it's perfectly okay to maim them. So now we're maiming people, and what happens now is we have more Reavers as a result, because all these people we're letting live are coming back as Reavers, so they're more dangerous now than they were before we maimed them. You know, it's like, so it's like, I don't know. It's weird to me that, like,
For sure.
even though they are you know, making, and then that's even before you get into the whole thing with Sword and how they're, you know, Magneto wants to, you know, amend or whatever the entire rule of kill no man.
Right.
He wants to add amendments to it, or, you know, some check, or probably not even checks and balances, more just like, hey, let's take some of these checks and balances off of it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Back to what I was saying before about just fantastic usage of the mutants' powers. One of the coolest things I thought was one of these children of the vault, which this is something that Hickman wrote in there that gave him the ability for Synch and Darwin to have just a plethora of different abilities, is because the children, we don't know what all powers that they possess, right? So he could just say anything and it makes sense. But I love that there is a child in the vault, Diamante, that is, he pretty much has the ability of memory, where he knows everything that the city knows. And it's a great way to give us some exposition and to explain pretty much what we've already been explaining and what we already know. But it was just an aspect of the story that I really dug, where we were able to learn about the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and now how we're going to get the 4th generation of Children of the Vault. Really fucking cool. I absolutely loved that. And, okay, so we have all this going on. They've been split up forever. And this is one thing, Dave, I know you had said that you were a little bit confused on this in your YouTube video, and you were asking listeners if they could clear it up for you. And I wonder if you got a sufficient answer as to why didn't Synch, when he used this child of the vault's abilities he dug down below the vault, and he got outside of the temporal bubble, I think you would call it. And I just thought it was, first of all, it's just a really cool idea that he waited a week and he came back in. And I took that as more or less him waiting a week so that he'd come back in and it would be 100 years later. And the children would have kind of let their guard down a little bit. And he could kind of sneak in there and get Wolverine freed. What did you get any answers? Or Ernie, can you shed any light, either one of you, on why did he not contact Xavier then? Or why was he not able to contact Xavier when he got outside of the temporal bubble?
Right. The best no prizes that I got from people were definitely just that, like, the idea that there's a difference between straight up leaving the vault and leaving the bubble. Okay, so like the temporal bubble is one thing, and then you can leave that but still be inside the vault, and there's no actual communication. So like I think there's a moment, maybe it's even in 5, maybe it's in 18, in issue 18, where like Laura, Synch, and Darwin kind of step through the breach, right? They step into the precipice, and that's when they actually enter the time bubble. I think that's how you make explanation of it, because otherwise, to me, it was like, Synch, back that puppy up, like make a backup, because you have the ability. And I don't totally get, even if you accept that answer, I don't totally get why he wouldn't step through the vault door. And I guess maybe he couldn't get back in without Wolverine to heal him. But then you go down a rabbit hole now, because it's like, well, he could step out, he could contact Professor X, he could get help from more X-Men. right? He could OG Wolverine's there, like literally same power set. Couldn't he go with him? So I don't know. You can nitpick it to death in that regard, but that was my understanding.
Okay. Yeah, that was the same under like when I read it, my brain kind of just like was like, okay, yeah, he's probably still in the vault though.
Yeah.
I just left it at that. Honestly, it's one of those situations where I feel like if you, and I think that this isn't even a Hickman problem, this is just comics in general. If you put too much brain power on it,
right,
the whole thing unravels, and then it's just like, you know what? I'm just gonna write it off. I'm just gonna write it off because that was my initial thought was like, well, he could probably just popped a message to Xavier right then and there.
Right. And okay. Well, talking about putting more, thinking about it more than you should. This is another thing, and we get this a lot in comics, where Sync doesn't have any telepathy, right? Nope. We do see this sometimes where he just like reaches out to Xavier. He says, Xavier. It's like, well, what fucking power are you using? Are we to assume that Xavier is just always kind of listening? Is Xavier like Siri?
Yes.
He's just waiting to hear his name called and then he'll answer you? Kind of a thing?
Kind of. Because remember, like, back in House of X, they were talking about how, like, it was so difficult to get a message between Xavier to Jean when they were on, going after Mother Mold or whatever. And Jean pushed her powers to, like, the absolute limit. She was actually able to get his attention. Now, granted, she's telepath, so that's one thing. But I kind of feel like a lot of times we've seen this with other characters in the comics in the past where someone, like, they just kind of, I think we've even seen this with Juggernaut very recently where he just kind of starts thinking, and Charles is like, "Oh yeah, hey, what's up?"
Now, I wrote it off as exactly that. It's just one of those comic book things that's accepted. One more thing that maybe you guys can clear up for me a little bit. I was going to look into it, but I'm like, fuck it, I'll just ask you guys when you come on. As far as Darwin's abilities go, the way I kind of understood his abilities is like, you take his head, you shove his head underwater, his life is in danger, his powers kick in, he grows gills. Something like that. Same thing. You throw him in fire, his skin's he's gonna do whatever he can, or his body will just react naturally to that. The way that this issue treats it is like, it's more subtle than that, where it's like, oh, the children of the vault have sniffers out there. They can smell you. That could potentially lead to them finding you and killing you. So his powers kick in, and he develops something that blocks the sniffers so that the children of the vault, or the city itself, just thinks that they're more children. Is this a retcon? Is this am I just not fully... We already talked about it. He's not a character that's really been fleshed out. So does this jive with the way you understand his powers?
I can take this one.
Please do.
Because I literally just in the last few months did a tremendous amount of reading about Darwin. Yeah. So yes, this is actually normal for him. This is actually normal for him. He basically, I forget the exact point. I did a video about it. It's in there somewhere. I don't remember exactly. That stuff, like, you have to clean out your memory warehouse ever so often. But basically, at one point in time, Darwin's powers changed to where he could proactively do things. Okay. So, like, if he felt like, hey, I need to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and proactively change my DNA, restructure it so I can be prepared for this, then that just kind of happens. It's, like, his powers work in such weird ways. Like, I think in his origin, because of the existential crisis he felt about being a mutant and how much he wanted his mother to just love him, he became smarter and got better grades. Like, his brain changed to make him, like, ridiculously intelligent so that he could get good grades in school so that his mom would love him because she hated him because she knew he was a mutant. She just didn't know. Like, she thought that she always kind of thought that he was, but then, like, she never really had hard confirmation until later. But it's one of those situations where, like, he's been able to, like, look at Shi'ar writing and suddenly he can just read it. Just because whatever he just needs at the time. And I think X Factor is probably the only comic that's ever really delved into Darwin in any meaningful way. Like kind of like Dave, what you were talking about. You were saying how like you wish that Hickman would have done more. Hey, what's going on in Darwin's head right now with all this? The closest we've ever gotten to anybody really giving him any kind of meaningful dialogue is in X Factor.
Yeah,
and even that's not even 100%. I think what probably should have been going on. Like Darwin just like honestly, he's a ridiculously difficult character I could imagine to write for.
Right. Well, that's what I was thinking while you're saying this. It might be him. He could pretty much. It sounds like he can do anything. Then he's like Superman.
Yeah, he survived Hela's death touch. He was literally a god of death for like a minute. Like he literally touched Hela and his powers like, no, you don't die. You basically become a dude version of Hela. There you go. You're Asgardian now.
Yeah.
Have fun with that.
The cool thing with Darwin too is like he's not actually Omega level, I guess, like he's not actually unbeatable or fully in control. And there are limits, I suppose, because he isn't designated to his adaptability. Because that was a big question I had at the end of X-Men 19 too, was like, like there's the Krakoa at the end of this issue. They resurrect everyone, right? So they like Professor X hears Sync, they resurrect Sync, they resurrect Laura, and they resurrect Darwin. And it kind of the first thing that popped in my head was like, we didn't have confirmation of death technically on Laura, although one can assume she's powerless fighting the vault, right? And then Darwin as well, like he gets atomized, which like sounds conclusive.